to episode 3 of this little mini series where I try and figure out what romantasy is and if I even enjoy it by reading the first year of books from the Fairyloot Romantasy subscription. So if you missed episode 1 and 2 where I explained why I'm doing this experiment, what it means, what I'm hoping to achieve, and also where I read the books from April to September 2024, you can find them both in a playlist linked down in my description box so that you can catch up at your convenience. But if you're here because you're already caught up and you're excited to see what my thoughts are going to be on the books for episode 3, then let me tell you, me too, because episode 3 is the one that I have been the most excited for since I decided to do this challenge, because I'm going to be reading the book from October to December 2024. So those are going to be The Coven by Harper L. Woods, Fire in the Sky by Sophie Jordan, and Heavenly Bodies by Amani Eriu. Of these 3, there are 2 that I'm excited to read. One of them is a 5-star prediction. One of them I am hoping to enjoy, but I'm not sure about. And the other one, honestly, I don't have a solid opinion on. But the one that is a 5-star prediction for me, and I hate saying that because it leaves me so much room to be disappointed, but that is Heavenly Bodies. This one has received quite a bit of hype. I don't actually really know anything about it, but I do know that people who have similar taste to me in fantasy romance and romantasy really enjoy this one. This and one other book are my top 2 reads, the ones that I'm the most excited to get to. This one is my top pick from the entire 12 months of the Fairyloot Romantasy subscription, the one that I'm excited to get to the most, along with one other book that is not going to be featured in this episode, but is also not one that I've read yet, if you guys want a little hint. So I'm cautiously optimistic and expecting great things from this one. One that I don't really have an opinion on is Fire in the Sky by Sophie Jordan. I haven't really heard anything about this one at this point. And then the one that I want to enjoy, but I'm not too sure how I'm going to feel about it, is the one that I'm going to be starting with from October 2024, and that is The Coven by Harper L. Woods. Now, I do have a paperback of the first book in Harper L. Woods' other Fae series that I have not read yet. I do think that that one is a why choose romance, so I've kept hold of it so that I could either read that one, obviously decide if I liked it, or read this, and then if I don't like Harper L. Woods' writing in general, it's unlikely I'm going to like a why choose or a reverse harem, although if you're up to date with this series, stranger things have happened. And the reason why I'm unsure if I'm going to enjoy this is because I do believe that Harper L. Woods writes very spicy books, and I personally prefer a slow burn and a lot of tension before we get to that point, and I'm not sure if this is that kind of book. So aside from the fact that I've generally just heard good things about Harper L. Woods, the reason why I'm excited about this one, and I do think I'll enjoy it, is that I believe it takes place in some sort of magical university where our main character goes to study witchcraft, and the love interest, I think, is the headmaster of this university. I do like a little bit of a taboo relationship in that regard, like the professor-student thing actually kind of does it for me, as long as we're obviously in a university setting. And the fact that it is like a little bit of a magic school, a little bit of dark academia, a little bit of the occult, I think I'm going to enjoy this one. So I'm not quite as far into this as I typically am when I bring you an update. I've just hit the page 100 mark. I'm on page 102, which is 102, not 102. Which is chapter 15, but considering this book is quite short, it's only 280 pages. I'm like a third of the way through, which is a pretty good place to update you, but I feel like I'm still getting to grips with this story. I am enjoying it, though. I really like the writing style. I would say of everything that I've read so far for this series, this is not necessarily the best written, but I mean, it could be. I just can't remember for sure, like, the writing styles of all of the books right now, but it is definitely the writing style that I am the most comfortable with, the most familiar with, and it has been the easiest for me to immediately sink into the story and kind of try and start figuring out what this book is about. Now, something that really interested me as soon as I opened this book is that before the story even starts, before we even get the author's note, I think, which is at the beginning of the book, apparently turning pages is outside of my ability right now. Okay, I tell a lie, it's after the author's note. We have a content warnings page. Now, normally the content warnings obviously give you a list of content warnings, but this one says the male lead in this series is pushy, domineering, and manipulative, which I mean, I guess is a content warning, but it goes on to say He goes beyond my typical morally grey anti-hero and is, in my opinion, an actual villain who gets his happily ever after. Now, Miss Harper L. Woods, do not promise if you cannot deliver. Like, I am excited now, and I'm just a little bit worried that maybe the love interest or the main male character, because he has his own perspective in this book, is maybe not going to perform to the degree that I expect a villain to. It is too soon to tell right now. Like, I don't know at the point that I'm currently at whether he is going to go into a true villainous path that satisfies me, or whether I feel like he's going to fall a little bit flat. I've just been burned by so many books that promise me a villain and then don't deliver one. But from the get-go, before I even started this book, that little paragraph definitely got my attention. I'm also really liking our main character in here, who is called Willow. She is a green, and in this world we have different types of witches. They're all from families that branch off from the founding family of this town and of this university, which I love that in a setup of a story, and stories that start with like mystical happenings surrounding the founders of some like small woodsy American town, fictional or real. And greens have the ability to kind of manipulate nature. They can make things grow. They're attuned to the land. The main character's mother faked her own death and shielded her children from the Covenant, and the Coven, which is a system that essentially, I don't know if exploits is the right word, but they are groomed and trained to serve the town and serve the Covenant, and they have arranged marriages to keep their bloodline strong and their bloodlines pure. The main character's mother didn't want this for herself and for her family, so she faked her own death, moved away from this school, kept her children protected, and our main character's father is also from a very powerful witch bloodline that they think has died out, and she has been trained her entire life to eventually go back to this school and to take revenge on the Covenant for everything that they have done to her, her family, all of the families in the past, but specifically to avenge her aunt who died in a massacre in the school sometime in the history. We're probably talking 10, 15, 20 years. I would say probably at least 20 years before the start of this story. So where this book opens up, the main character's mother has just died. She's attending her funeral and she's preparing to send her brother off to live with his father so that she can return to the school and do her duty. Because her mother has died, the wards that have been protecting her have been broken, and so the school is now aware that she is alive and she's the last of her line. So they send the headmaster, who is called, I think he's called Alaric Grey, to go and collect her, which is where these two first meet. So Grey himself, he's not a witch, he's a vessel, and vessels are vampiric creatures that feed on the blood of witches, and I believe that they were created by the line of black witches that the main character descends from on her father's side that have since like completely died out or are thought to have died out. And the magic in this world is also passed down the maternal line, so there's no way that anybody can know who her father truly is, but she is going to be looking for the bones of her ancestors, which is how the black witches access their magic, to collect the bones of her aunt and bring them back home to her father, but also destroy the vessels and the school in the process. So we have our main character working undercover. She's highly skilled, she's highly trained, she's honestly like a bit of a badass, and I like that she's going into this school to infiltrate it and tear it apart. That is one of my favorite story setups. We see it in Red Rising, we see it in The Will of the Many, kind of. We also see it to some degree in Nevernight, where she's not gone in to tear apart the school, but she has gone in to learn some valuable skills to help her tear apart something else. And then we also have the complex family ties that she has that tie her to different elements of this school and the society and this magic, and it's all very interesting so far. So definitely positive thoughts only. I was worried going into this that it was going to be extremely spicy and that was going to start like straight off at the beginning of the book. That's just kind of the impression that I got from a couple of people I'd heard talk about Harper L. Woods. But so far, while we've had a few, let's say, dirty thoughts, nothing romantically has really happened at this point. Part of the main character's goal in the infiltration of this school is to seduce one of the vessels. I don't know whether it has to be the male main character specifically or whether it's just supposed to be like any powerful vessel. He's the one that she's gunning for, so I do feel like we're going to definitely have some developments happening quite quickly, especially because of how short this book is. But so far I'm very happy with the pace of this, both story-wise and romantically. I confess I did forego our usual like 65 to 75% check-in for the Coven, and I have now finished this book, and let me tell you, I really enjoyed this one. I don't know if it's my favorite one that we've read so far. I don't know whether this beats Beasts of Briar, but I did also give this one 4 stars, which is great news. It is once again a little bit of a low 4-star rating because I do have some issues with it, areas that I think I would have enjoyed if they were done a little differently, and also I didn't love the romance, which obviously when we're talking about romantasy, fantasy romance, like the romance is a big part of this. It's not a small element in the story. I was really excited obviously when I read the little author forward, the content warnings that said we were getting a true villain in this one, and I will say that the character of Alaric Grey definitely followed through, especially when we got to the end. And I did get to a point where I was like, okay, maybe I'm not enjoying this one as much as I was at the beginning of the story when I was really getting into the writing, the atmosphere, the setting, and our main character who I still love. And then when we cycled back around to the end and we had like the big events, like end events of the book, and when they started to play out, I did once again start to really enjoy this one. So in terms of the romance, first off, the spice level, I would give it a 4, maybe a 4.5, because while I feel like the sexual content is not as not overbearing, but like consistently present as it has been in other books we've read for this challenge, it isn't like right there from page 1 and the main thing that our characters are talking about. It's not that present. It is very consistently sprinkled throughout this book, and it is very explicit where it is, but the reason why I would push this up maybe to a little bit of a 4.5 is because I feel like we are dealing with like heavier kinks than we have in any of the books that I've read in the subscription so far. The main one I would say is probably blood play. It's nothing like crazy extreme, but obviously we are dealing with a vampiric character here. He does get his strength from the blood of witches, and then there's also a sexual element there as well for the witches and the vessels that wish there to be, and obviously with this being a romantasy, that is kind of the direction where this does start to go. The reason why I didn't care about this too much romantically is because I actually didn't feel like there was any sexual tension between them. I feel like all of the sexual tension was kind of just like told to us as opposed to showed to us or built in a way that I ever felt was tangible. And because of that, I feel like there was quite a bit of distance between me and the relationship that was being built in here. Like I wasn't truly invested. I did really enjoy the plot. I feel like this book could have been longer. The plot, the world, the characters, everything could have been a little bit more fleshed out and a little bit more complex, but that's just personal preference for me. Like 275 pages, that's like very short for me for a fantasy story, and I did really enjoy the fantasy elements of this, so I feel like if it was pushed more maybe towards the 400 page mark and we would have lingered on some more areas of this world or explored some more areas of this world, or maybe just like I said, lingered, like spent a little bit more time in this school setting, which pretty much the entire of the book does take place there, but really like just indulgently exploring it. Like we all love a magic school, and I also really love a spooky town, and this definitely delivered on that. I really liked the gloomy atmosphere of this like magic school, and also the way that it was created within like the history of the town, the history of the witches, and the way that it was operating today. There was a lot of elements of interest in here. I loved the Covenant, who are essentially the original witches that were created, and they're now just skeletons that rule this school, and I liked all of those little tidbits that I wish that we would have just had time to explore a little bit more, but we sadly didn't because it's short. So would I continue on with this one? I'm open to it. We'll see what happens when the sequel rolls around. I don't know if it's already out because this was a indie romance that was traditionally published, but I think I do really like these covers. I think that this atmosphere and color palette and the way it kind of looks like a gothic portrait really lends itself well to the atmosphere of this book, although like the skulls and stuff that we have on the rest of it are not my favorite. Like I don't love the naked hardcover, but I would definitely be open to continuing, so we'll see how I feel when the Fairyloot edition, assuming that there's going to be one, when that's announced, and if I decide to get my hands on that. At this point, there's plenty about this world that I'm curious about, especially as we were coming to the end of this book and the note that we left it on, but I also don't think my life would be ruined if I didn't continue this series, you know what I mean? So that was what book is this now? Book 7? I think. out of 12. We're doing really well, actually. I can't believe I'm over halfway through. And the next book that I'm going to be picking up, book number 8, is also a short-ish one. This one's about 320 pages, and it is the book from November 2024, which is Fire in the Sky by Sophie Jordan. Now, this is the one of the 3 that I don't really have an opinion on. The synopsis, I remember when I read it, didn't sound overly appealing to me. Like, it didn't have a bunch of things that I dislike, but it also wasn't begging me to read it, you know? I think it centers around warriors, and our main character is forced to marry this like brutish warrior guy that people look down upon, even though they provide like a protection service for the people of the kingdom. And she also has, I think, like a best friend. There's like a best friend captain of the guard trope in here as well. I mean, I'm assuming that it's going to tip the way of the warrior brute guy, but I mean, that's typically my preference when it comes to these things. I feel like this is reminding me somehow of the A Faint in Blood by Danielle L. Jensen, I think is what it was called, the Norse mythology one that she had. I don't know whether it's kind of just like the warrior vibe that's tipping me that way. I have nothing to base this assumption on. That's just kind of the vibes that I'm getting from it. But hopefully I do enjoy this one. I feel like, interestingly, obviously I DNF'd the Half King at the end of the last episode, but I do feel like we are on a pretty steady incline. Like, the worst of this subscription was at the beginning, and I feel like the longer we go, each episode is gradually getting better and better. I'm interested to see obviously how the end of this one plays out, but then also how that translates into the last episode as well, because I currently think that this one is the one that has the best books, the ones that I'm the most interested in and think I'll enjoy anyway. I am about 45% of the way through Fire in the Sky. I'm on page 132. I have gotten a little bit carried away with this today because I don't know if you can tell with my voice, but I'm a little bit hungover. It was my dad's 60th birthday last night, and I did not go hard. I did not drink a lot. I had 3 drinks. I just don't really drink anymore. So while I'm not like hungover, I'm absolutely not feeling my best. I'm a little tired. I need my throat hurts. So when I woke up this morning and I was like, okay, I want to get some reading done, I was not going to be reading this with my eyeballs. So I've actually switched over to the audiobook while I was listing things on Vinted and making thumbnails for my videos, and I've made it 13 chapters in. I'm up to part 3, which is called The Crossing, and I would definitely actually recommend the audiobook for this. A surprisingly high production audio. Who publishes this? HQ. So it's not like it's a tiny publisher or anything, but this is a full cast audiobook. There's actually 4 narrators, and I've just scrolled through the list of chapters because I was like, I'm sure I've only actually heard 3 perspectives so far, and I'm right, I have only heard 3 perspectives. There is 1 perspective yet to come, and there is only, as far as I can tell, 1 chapter from that perspective, but we still have a narrator dedicated to that 1 chapter. So audio production, great, would recommend. The interesting thing about it though is that I from the very beginning of this, when I started reading it with my eyeballs first, I've been getting Game of Thrones vibes from this, specifically like Daenerys Khal Drogo vibes, because we're following this girl who is, she's not a princess, but she is the whipping girl of the royal family. So essentially when the queen was pregnant, they took this girl from a common family and she bears the punishment for all of the princesses. So if they do something bad, she gets whipped for it, or she can't have her dinner because they're being punished. And so she's raised as a daughter of a fashion of the royal family, but she's not like an official princess. So this guy comes from the borderlands, who they describe, I think they call him like the beast of the border, and he is essentially the leader of a bunch of war bands that protect the border of this country from, I'm assuming, like the neighboring country, and they're treated terribly for it, even though they perform this obviously very valuable, assumedly well needed service for the good of the realm. So this story starts where the war bands, or some of the war bands, including their leader, comes to the palace. He demands that the king gives him one of his daughters to wife as payment for like all of the work that they do. If they truly appreciate them, if they truly want to show gratitude, they will give one of their daughters to this guy to be his wife. So they agree, but they use like a loophole where they give our main character, who is the whipping girl, so she's a princess in name technically, but she's not actually a princess, you know? So she is forced into this marriage with this guy who's called the Beast Beast of the Borders. What is his actual name? I think it's Fel is what it says on his chapters. Yeah, he's called Fel, and they have to consummate their wedding night. She goes into like the wedding night veiled. She's not allowed to show her face so that he doesn't know that he's been duped, and they consummate the wedding in front of an audience, and then she removes her veil. He finds out who she is, and he's really not happy about it and tells her that she is going to suffer for the betrayal of the royal family. The vibes that I'm very much getting is obviously like protected. Well, not Daenerys was a little bit different, obviously, because all of her family were dead and she had been traveling around with her brother, but she is forced into this marriage with Khal Drogo so that the Targaryen line get the allegiance of Khal Drogo's warbands. So it was given very much those vibes, but I then started the audiobook, and the narrator they've chosen for Fel, and also like the accent that he has in his like chapters that are Tamsin's chapters, so the accent that she also does for him, is Yorkshire. It's giving Jon Snow, which is even funnier. So now I've got like a Jon Snow Ygritte comparison in my head, but with the roles very much reversed. But I'm enjoying this one. I will say I don't know if I would be having the same experience with it if I was reading it physically, because audiobooks are not a different reading experience for me, but if the audio narration really brings a story to life, then I mean obviously the narration is different than if I read it, and the voice that I cast to the characters and the cadence of speech, or where the inflection lies in the sentence, the way that the narrators place all of that as opposed to where I would place it if I was reading it in my head, is obviously going to be different. So I think that the audiobook, with it being full cast and well produced, is a really enjoyable experience, and I am also enjoying the story at this point. Right now it's reasonably spicy because we have had like the consummation scene of the wedding, which was like a full-blown like sex scene, but aside from that it hasn't been anything overtly explicit or anything like that. I'm not really sure where we're going in terms of the plot, because as you can see there are dragons in this story, and we've had a discussion within this book about how witches don't exist anymore. I think that they were allies or worshipped amongst the people, and then everyone kind of turned their backs on them. So I feel like that is going to come into play later in the story. But then also the main character, it has been alluded to that she has some maybe mystical properties, and the connection that she has with this lord is not necessarily anything mystical, but it seems a little bit out of the ordinary, shall we say. Interestingly though, actually, because I was thinking about the comparison that I just made to Tamsin and Fel in here, and Daenerys and Khal Drogo. This series, like I said, obviously has dragons, but then on the back we have a horse, and the Dothraki in Game of Thrones are the horse lords. So I'm wondering if, because like, I mean, they do ride horses, they're a warband, but I don't think they've been called horse lords or anything. But I'm wondering if the inspiration for this book has very heavily come from Game of Thrones, and also I'm wondering whether that is the significance of the horse on here. Something else that's really cool about this book, actually, I feel like they've actually put a lot of money into this, given the quality of the audiobook, but also the art in here. Stunning. Like, it's such a well produced book. The illustrations as well are different for each section of the book, and we also have, I'm not going to flick through it because I don't want to spoil it for you, because I think I've spoiled it for myself because I have flicked through this, but on the corners of the pages we have one of these things which I can't remember what they're called, but is it like a heliotrope or something? No, heliotropium is a flower. It's a kineograph. So where you flick through the corners of the pages and the illustration is like animated, it moves. But yeah, I have seen that animation now, and I feel like that does contain maybe a spoiler. I haven't read the synopsis, so I don't know what exactly we have that's revealed in there, but I'm excited to continue on with this one. I have also managed to get an ebook copy on Libby, so I'm going to be picking it up in ebook at some point. So I guess then we'll kind of find out whether my enjoyment is being heavily influenced by the audiobook, or whether I'm just enjoying this one in general. So I know when I spoke to you guys yesterday, I said I thought I might have a little bit of a hangover, but one day on, I can confirm that I actually think I'm a little bit sick. It's nothing too major. I'm just a little bit tired and I have a sore throat, but it's at a really inconvenient time because I have been wanting to do lots of like cleaning and tidying and organizational stuff that I've been pushing off in favor of work over the last couple of weeks, because I am going on a trip very soon, and I also need to pack and organize for that trip and make sure everything is in order before I leave. believe. And this is taking me out. I've been doing some stuff today while I've been listening to the audiobook, but I have also read quite a bit of this physically, and I'm not sure exactly how far I'm into it percentage wise. My audiobook says I think 69%, but I think that's a little bit off in comparison to the ebook. But I'm on page 220, so I think I've got like 101 pages left, and I'm still having a very good time with this, even though, because I mentioned that maybe my enjoyment was partially because I was listening to the audiobook, I have read probably like about 60 to 100 pages of this on my Kindle last night, and I'm still having a really good time. I really like the writing style in this one. It is nothing special in terms of like, it doesn't stand out in any way. It is very easily readable though. I felt like I struggled to get into the first couple of chapters of this one, but since I listened to the beginning part in audio, really enjoyed the audiobook, and then transferred back to reading it physically, I'm getting along with it a little bit more now that I'm a little bit more established with the story. I will say though, I was feeling at the beginning of this week especially a little bit slumpy, so that may have also contributed, and I feel like mixing up the medium with which I'm consuming this one has helped me a little bit. I'm actually also very happy with the romance levels that we have going on in the story right now as well. We've had a couple of spicy scenes. They are not as explicit. I would say they are still pretty explicit, but they're not as explicit as a lot of what I've been reading in the subscription so far. They're a little more tame, shall we say, and very in keeping with this fantasy world that we're living in, where we also have a little bit of a historical proprietary element in here, especially in regards to our main character Tamsin, who has been raised to be a lady amongst the princesses. So she doesn't know anything about sex. Like, she knows that she'll be married someday and then she will have children, but she doesn't know anything about pleasure. She hasn't been taught about her body, and stuff like that is coming into play. But I think that the way that the characters approach the sexual interactions in this book is very in keeping with them living in this world that has a little bit of a traditionally historical mindset in comparison to what we do regarding sex today. So I'm liking that is consistent, because now that I've noticed it in this and I'm really paying attention to the amount of spiciness we're having in these books for the sake of ranking it on a spice level, I am realizing how sometimes we will have historical fantasies kind of set in this world that do lean a little bit more explicit, which can feel a little bit out of place given the world that these characters are supposed to be raised in. But this feels very kind of like seamless and natural. I'm enjoying the plot. It isn't moving especially quickly right now. We have just had a big realization and a big plot event that is going to kind of alter the course of things to come, so I'm interested to see how that's going to resolve. We're only just getting to a point as well where we're really discussing and exploring the more magical elements of this world, so the dragons and the witches. Up until this point, they've been briefly mentioned as being a part of the history of this world. The main male character fell, his parents were killed by dragons, so he is especially against them, but they're pretty much extinct in this world. Like, they're extremely rare. People generally don't even see them. I just want to see like what the synopsis actually discloses about this story. Okay, so it says that she harbors dark secrets, but it doesn't disclose what those dark secrets are, so I will not disclose them here. But yeah, there's a big thing that she doesn't know about herself, which is a massive part of this story and a massive part of what is going to transpire going forward. But up until this point, it has been very political. The marriage that these two have been, well, she's been forced into it, he was tricked into it, was supposed to be so that he could have a seat at the table and advocate for his people in the borderlands, and also the lesser people, like the people who aren't nobles that are struggling a lot. And Tamsin knows nothing about this because she's been raised in the palace her entire life. So it's going to be about, I think, the borderlands versus like the nobility and the palace, but then we're also going to have this magical element, and I think the resurgence of magic and that coming to the forefront in the mix as well. So definitely enjoyable when I'm reading it, which I'm not necessarily surprised about, but I definitely went into the first book for this vlog, and also the next one that I'm reading I'm going to be going into with preconceptions, and this one I went in not really knowing anything about it at all. So it's good that I'm enjoying it. I'm really happy about that. I appreciate that I sound worse than I have the previous 2 days, but you're just gonna have to take my word for it that I actually feel better. I'm just more congested right now. I'm currently on sprints with my patrons, and when I decided to do this, I was like, yeah, this is a great idea. I feel okay today. My voice is like barely hanging on, but I do really need to update you guys, because last night I finished Fire in the Sky by Sophie Jordan, and I know that this is a recurring theme at this point, but
think that this is the best book that I've read so far for this challenge. Each book is getting better and better, and the next one is the one that I'm expecting to enjoy the most. So I am shook, honestly, especially because I didn't expect much from this one. But I will admit, obviously, like, I haven't been feeling too great over the last couple of days, and so it's kind of like I'm tired, and it's really easy for me to lock into something and also enjoy it without thinking. Like, I haven't been thinking too hard about this one. I don't have the capacity to think super hard right now. I'm all like head coldy. Like, I've been much more ill in my life, but I just feel like a little bit groggy and a little bit stuffy, and if that contributed to how much I enjoyed this book, then so be it. I'm not even mad about it because I had such a great time. I gave this one 4 stars. Unlike Bonded by Thorns and the Coven, this is like a solid 4. 100% at this point I aim to continue on with this series. Something that I really liked about this is that it is quite slow throughout. We start in this palace setting, and then the majority of the book takes place actually traveling to the place where Fel lives, who is the Lord of the Borderlands. So it's quite slow. It is not even necessarily developing their relationship a ton, but I feel like we really grow attached to our main character in here, who is a character that I actually really like. I love her tenacity. I love how she grows and develops and breaks out of her shell in this. She has a long way to go still, but a lot of people think her weak because she's like a pampered princess, even though she is the whipping girl because of the place where she's lived, where she's grown up. They think that she's sheltered and she's weak and that she's not strong enough to survive the crossing to the place where Fel lives, but also to rule as their lady. And the way that she just kind of grows and jumps from strength to strength throughout this and proves everyone wrong, or starts to prove them wrong, I really enjoyed. I do think this book could have been longer. I would have liked this book to have been longer because I would have liked to have spent a little bit more time in their relationship. I did like that we had multiple perspectives in here and we got Fel's perspective, because I think the thing that endeared me to their relationship more was his perspective as opposed to Tamsin's, and to see the way that he was feeling about her and about the situation, I think also really endeared me to him. I need to look actually, because I remembered that I'd seen the end pages here and I kept forgetting, oh hello, to look at the back to see what he was supposed to look like. He looks kind of young, which I think he is like 25-ish. It doesn't specify, I don't think, in this one, but for me he just looks a little young. But we have our imaginations. We can age him up like 5 years, that's fine. Something that I also really liked about this, and it's not like I've never read a book that has a setting like this before, but I feel like when I was reading this I realized how many of the books that I've read for this challenge and how many books I read, fantasy books I read in general, that really keep us centralized in the palace location, and we're deep into like palace politics. We have dance scenes and everything kind of is centered around a city. So I like that this very quickly took us on the road. It does have some politics in it. It is dealing with like potential war brewing, and also the fact that, like I said, Fel wants a seat at the table so that he can get more fair living conditions for his people and the people who live outside of the city. So I actually thought that it was quite refreshing and a little bit of a change of pace to take us away from that and move us to like the outskirts, which is where I feel like the slight, very, very slight comparison to the Danielle L. Jensen book that I can never remember the name of. I didn't like that one very much. I gave it 3 stars. Fate Inked in Blood? Yeah, that's where I feel like the very slight comparison comes in, because that is inspired by Norse mythology, so you can kind of compare it to the barbarian society that we have in here, in that they are a society of warriors. They don't have like pretty gowns, they're not obsessed with jewels, they're more about like war and honor and battle, which is a setting that I typically enjoy, especially when I'm reading like adult epic fantasy as opposed to fantasy that's more like romance based. I think one of the reasons why this really worked for me, because I liked the writing, but I do think that in places it was a little bit clunky and a little bit repetitive. It did the thing where it repeats the same thing 3 times using different variations, and I can't think of an example right now, but she might call her husband like the beast of the borderlands, the brutal barbarian, the king of the border, like the same thing 3 times in a row for accentuation, which is just a little bit melodramatic. And then I also found in just a couple of places it took me out of the story a little bit. But I do think that the structure of this, the way that it is quite slow and it's a slow build to the end where the shit really hits the fan, is my preferred introduction to a fantasy world. Like, I like to slowly get to know the characters while we're thinking about the plot, but it hasn't really kicked into motion yet. We're not really dealing with it yet. And then at the end of book one, you kind of get to a point where the wheels are turning on the plot. So you know it's going to ramp up in book two, but you've already built the attachment through the slow times for me to actually be invested when things get a little bit more action based. So this is the first true solid success of this series, I think. The other two that I gave 4 stars were like, there's a couple in here, like I gave The Wren and the Holly Library 3 stars. It's like a 3.5 rounded down. Whereas The Coven and the Bond, why can I never remember the title of that book either? I will admit I'm on my last brain cell right now. Bonded by Thorns, they were like 3.5s rounded up. This is like solid 4 stars. Enjoyed myself a lot. Interestingly as well, the spice rating on this, I would give it like a 3 chili pepper rating. There are like 2.5 spicy scenes in here. They are definitely explicit, but I've read way more explicit sex scenes in my life, and even throughout the course of like this challenge. And also I would say most of the time, while there's definitely an attraction between them and they do think about each other because they're married, they didn't want to be married to each other, but they're obviously going to want to try and make this work. So there is definitely a lot of romantic thinking happening throughout the course of this book, but outside of those 2.5 spicy scenes and the fact that they're interested in each other and they're trying to like riddle out this problem they've ended up in, especially as like the main character Tamsin, as she finds out some things about herself. She's like, I don't know what to do, like I don't feel like I can be with this guy now, but I really want to. So I liked that little element of pining we had there as well, which was kind of unexpected in a forced marriage scenario for me anyway. Aside from that, this is very much a plot focused book. The plot is slow in coming in terms of actually ramping up, but we are building up the threads of it as well as our attachment to the characters throughout the first like half, 60-70% of this book. Very happy with this one. It's not my favorite edition, sadly. I don't love the grey, I think, although I do really like the illustration of the dragon. And actually I quite like this, but also this is just the regular UK cover. They changed the colorway. I think the original one's like black and this one's white. I love the color change on this. So maybe I'll flip it around actually, but I think one of the reasons I went into this not necessarily expecting to dislike it, but I definitely wasn't expecting to love it, I feel is because this cover looks like a YA fantasy from like 2018. Like it's given Serpent and Dove, which is fantasy romance, but YA fantasy romance. So I went into it kind of expecting that, and honestly, this has some elements of like good, strong, high fantasy world building, like epic fantasy world building, and I'm here for it. So we're now very excitingly going to be moving on to the last book for this episode, which is book number 9, and this I'm pretty sure is the book that I'm the most excited about from the entire Fairyloot Romantasy subscription, and it is Heavenly Bodies by Amani Eriu, I think. I did look up the pronunciation, but I don't feel like I got a lot of good sources. Not only do I genuinely expect to love this book, mainly based off the reviews of other people with similar taste to me who've also really enjoyed this. This is also my favorite Fairyloot edition from this subscription. Probably one of my favorite Fairyloot editions today, actually. I cannot even explain how obsessed I am with pretty much every element of this one. It's gorgeous, and I genuinely, aside from the fact that I think I'm going to enjoy it, I hope I love it just because of that. I'm going to be honest, I'm probably going to have to give you a synopsis when I'm a little bit of the way into this one, because it's one of those, like, I'm not very good at processing fantasy synopses without context. This one, especially with like the low brain power, was going in one eyeball and like straight out of somewhere. But I think it's going to have the fated mates trope. The stars, I think, are very present in this world as like gods of like different elements, and hopefully it will be a hit. If this one is not a hit, I will actually be devastated. So I would like it to be known that at exactly 200 pages into this book, not only is it a much quicker read than I anticipated it being, but I am high-key obsessed with Heavenly Bodies. It took a little while, and top tip actually, if you had this book before it was traditionally published, because I had an ebook that I'd gotten from like a Stuff Your Kindle day ages ago. I don't even remember how long ago it was, but I know that the author Amani Eriu was going to be at Rare, which she was when I went last year in Edinburgh. So I got her book on like a Stuff Your Kindle day, but it was the indie published version. And since it's been tradpubbed, it has been rewritten, not just edited. So I started my Kindle copy yesterday. I read like 3 chapters of it, and I was like, you know what? I don't really like the writing. It's a little bit much. Like, things just seem in the wrong order and it's not doing it for me. And then I looked at the like first page, the first chapter of the traditionally published version, completely different. I'll give you a little bit of a breakdown of the plot because I didn't earlier, but this is following a girl who's called Alara, and her parents have been killed by a star. The stars are kind of like gods in this world. If I'm being honest, I don't quite understand the way that the magic system works in relation to the gods. Like every area or kingdom of this world has a star associated with it, kind of like patron saints, and they also have 3 different abilities, and I think every citizen has one of these abilities. Very rarely somebody has the power to control all 3. Now our main character Alara is one of these, and so is the love interest Enzo, but these 2 are from enemy kingdoms. Alara is from like a kingdom that has shadow magic and dark magic, and Enzo is from, I think his kingdom's called Helios, which is the kingdom of light. So his father declared war on Alara's kingdom because they believe that Alara's parents murdered his mother. So in retaliation, Helios went to war with them. So they have been enemies for quite some time, and a star is summoned into Alara's kingdom and kills her mother and father, and then she's kidnapped by Helios and taken to their king. Now the king would like Alara to kill the king of stars because he believes that he believes that the stars are like holding them back, that the people should be able to rule on their own instead of being beholden to them, and because she wields the 3, she is in a unique place where she is actually able to kill a star, and he assigns his son Enzo to train her. Now, the way that the 2 books differ from the 3 chapters that I read is that in the indie version, Alara is taking herself to Helios to seek refuge there, because the star is coming for her. The star is trying to kill her. So the king says like, yeah, you can seek refuge here, but you're painting a huge target on our back. So I want you to train with my son to kill a star. Whereas in the traditionally published version, she is kidnapped and she is forced to accept this bargain to be able to like avenge her parents, but also keep her life. I will admit that the world building, while I do have like a decent understanding of what's going on at this point in the story, I could definitely, for my own purposes and how much I like to really get invested in the world that I'm reading about, for my preferences, I could know a little bit about the world. I could be a little bit clear about all of the different stars and the way, because we do have at the beginning, to be fair, we have a map, so that shows us obviously all of the kingdoms, but then we also have a map of the stars. So if we go for the kingdom that our main character is from, Alara, it has pronunciations as well. So it's called Ariit, and it is the patron, or Ariit is the star, who is the patron star of Perseus. Ariit is also the king of stars and the god of wrath, war, and blood, also known as the tyrant, because they're all also kind of associated with like a tarot deck as well. I'm trying to work out, actually, is Ariit on here? Would that be, yeah, that would be Aries, right? Ariit. Sorry, I was gonna save it for the next update to clarify some things, but I am losing it editing this vlog right now. It's so funny because I'm like, oh yeah, there's like a map to the stars with a pronunciation guide, and then I proceed to misread it and incorrectly pronounce the name of the star throughout this entire clip. So the name of the star is Ariet. It literally says that in the pronunciation guide, but my one brain cell was working so hard during the filming of this clip that just was not something that registered in my brain. I'm so sorry. What's Taurus on here? Because that's what I would be. Tora is the patron star of Aphrodite, which is Aphrodite, I guess, goddess of lust and pleasure, also known as the seductress. So yeah, like it loosely follows the zodiac and also has an element of like Greek gods in here as well. But the way that it's like introduced in the book and spoken about in the book, we are mainly focusing on Ariet, who is the king of stars, and then we're mostly focusing on the magical abilities that are associated with the kingdom that Ariet is the patron star of, which is Perseus, which is where Alara is from, which honestly I could not have told you the name of the place until I've read it now in the star guide. And we're also focusing on Helios, which is where the book has taken place up until this point, and their patron star is Leon. So I'm assuming that they are representing the Leos. That makes sense actually, because the love interest Enzo is called like the lion of something, and his family sigil is a lion. So the way that this started out reminded me a lot of like Lady of Darkness by Melissa K. Roerich, Throne of Glass, that kind of vibe. And I feel like the pacing that we have up until this point is also very much in line with those series. Throne of Glass is one of my favorite series of all time, and the Lady of Darkness series is one that I'm currently reading as a read along for my patrons. We're currently up to book 3, Lady of Ashes, which I'll be reading very soon. And so the kind of fantasy romance story that it is definitely resonating with me. It is also creating tension through just so many ways that I love. Like, I am simping Frenzo. I've been simping for this man since page like 100, which is how you know it's good and how you know I'm having a good time with it, because you know how many books I've read throughout this video series and I'm like, I don't care about this man, I don't like this man, I read this entire book and I do not care about this romance. Like, I am deeply invested. We are building this sexual tension because Enzo has been tasked with training Alara as well. We have tons of training scenes, tons of fight scenes. Also, it's enemies to lovers because obviously we have more of an element of grey morality or like a misunderstood hero than Alara initially believed going into this. She thinks he's the villain. He isn't necessarily, but we have that tension between them because they're from enemy kingdoms. Enzo believes that Alara's parents killed his mother. Alara believes that Enzo is partially responsible not only for harassing her kingdom and being responsible for the deaths of tons of her citizens, but also played a hand in the fact that her parents were murdered. So they do not like each other to start off with, which creates a great starting point for this for me. Then the fact that they're sparring, they're training, they have opposing magics, they're constantly forced into physical proximity with each other. They're also like verbally sparring and constantly arguing. I am eating this up and it is doing the thing that I love, that I've seen done time and time again, and I keep eating it up. But it is like the misunderstood hero. Like, Alara believes so many terrible things about him, but the more time she spends with him, she realizes that he's maybe not that guy, and the type of guy that he is actually the exact opposite. Guys, when I said that this was a 5-star prediction, I actually thought about it and I was like, no, you know what? Like, I give nothing 5 stars. I never give out 5 stars. This could be 5 stars. I mean, we'll see. We'll see. We're still quite slow within the pacing, which is fine because I love that. But obviously I have a lot of the book to go. I'm not quite at the halfway point yet, and there is tons that can happen. But I, at this point, am loving the relationship that is being built here. I'm also really loving exploring the corner of the world that we're currently in. I love the side characters. I just feel like I want just a little something special from the world, which I am enjoying the world. I just don't feel like I understand it as much as I maybe want to. And providing the plot is good, if we leave this on like a moment of high tension, this book, it could be 5 stars. And I'm shook, like I know I expected to love this, but I have been burned before by going into a book like because a ton of people really love it and it just not being very good. And I was hoping that it wasn't the case with this one, but you can never be sure. So I'm glad that it's actually coming through for me and I'm having a great time. I am in the final stretch of this book now. I've got 120 pages left. I'm just before the page 400 mark on chapter 54 and I am still loving it. The tension within the romance has not let up. There's been quite a lot of progression in the relationship between our two main characters as well. There is a lot of kind of back and forth though to keep that tension present, and I imagine that some people will get impatient with that, but I am loving it. Like, the anticipation is better than the end result for me, and that is why books like this, and this one in particular, is really working for me. We have also progressed the plot a ton. We have explored different kingdoms of the world with different stars. We've met different stars, and so I'm a lot more familiar with the world than I was to start out with, and that is something obviously that in the last update I was saying I felt would need to improve for me a little bit or develop a little bit more for me to maintain my enjoyment, which has definitely happened. We've also had some moments of high action to advance the plot, and I feel like we are heading into another one, like going towards the end of this one. So yeah, so far so good. I'm still a massive Enzo stan, and I feel like that is definitely not going to change, even though I do feel like we are going to have some kind of element like similar to a third act breakup in here, but not exactly like a third act breakup, which I'm not looking forward to because I feel like it's going to hurt me because I am personally invested in this one. There are, if I think about it, there are a couple of things that I feel like we're just taking at face value that are a little bit of a plot hole. An example of this is that the king of Helios is not very nice. So Enzo's dad, not really a great guy, which we know pretty much from the first instance that we meet him. But all throughout this, like, Enzo and Alara have been training, like, they've hung out, there's been festivals and solstice parties that they've attended together, all of which the king is like, if he's not present, there are plenty of people loyal to the king that are hanging around the palace, that are also attending these things, that have plenty of opportunity to see the way that Alara and Enzo are interacting together, and the way that it's really obvious that they're into each other, because they're also not being discreet about anything. And there is an element of glamour involved, I guess, because Alara is glamoured so that if anybody sees her, they don't know that she is from her kingdom. They think that she's from Helios just so that she doesn't stand out, and because those two are like enemy kingdoms. But obviously the king knows who she is, so if word is getting back to him that like his son is getting awfully close with this random girl and he's spending a lot of time with her, then the king is obviously going to know who that is. But then we got to a point where like they were getting ready to orchestrate like this, I guess, speech that would kickstart a part of the plot that was kind of orchestrated by the king. And he says to Enzo and Alara, like, you guys gonna have to pretend that you actually like each other for this. Like, it's not been obvious for months, because this book actually spans like quite a large amount of time. Like, it doesn't take place over a week or two. I'm pretty sure it's been like a few months. So it's not like it's a small amount of time for things to fly under the radar either, but apparently the king is completely oblivious that these two even like each other as friends. Like, really, my guy? You don't have spies? You don't have people keeping an eye on things for you, especially when it's your idea to train this girl as a weapon? You don't have an unbiased third party keeping an eye on this training and reporting like the progress back to you? That just feels like something that a king would have, but not this guy. This guy doesn't have a clue what's going on in his kingdom, despite him trying to like weave his political web. I am a little bit worried about the last 120 pages, because I do, with the type of story that this is shaping up to be and the way we keep introducing new parts that are potentially going to create some more tension in the plot, and we're also gearing up to some big moves being made, I feel like there's definitely potential for this to end, if not on a cliffhanger exactly, then at least in a place where our characters are separated or in some sort of peril.
I'm not accepting this. This is book one in a trilogy? Well, that's not fair. What? Don't understand. I'm just reading the same line over and over again. Of course. With me reading that last chapter.
Well, so I think that it is pretty obvious from that little clip that Heavenly Bodies by Imani Arayu kept its claws in me until the very end, and I loved it. I gave this book 5 stars, guys. I am shocked that it actually pulled through for me, but things that are very important to me when it comes to rating books highly is that they keep me engaged, they keep me invested, especially emotionally invested, and they also take me by surprise. Now, as somebody who is super familiar with fantasy romance as a genre at this point, and also just fantasy actually, and also somebody who is incredibly good at picking up on foreshadowing and plot points most of the time. Obviously things do sometimes take me by surprise, which is good because I actually want them to. I don't want to be able to foreshadow like what's going to happen in a book every single time. It is very rare for me to actually be taken by surprise at this point, and the last 80 pages of this book were a wild ride. I did not see a lot of these plot twists coming, and I will say say that because I'm not surprised by the majority of books that I read, sometimes that does lead me into a false sense of security, a level of complacency, where I'm not expecting things to be super shocking and dynamic, and so I guess let my guard down a little bit, and they then have the room to shock me. Now, I don't think that that's necessarily what this book did. I also wouldn't say it has like a master level of foreshadowing, but I think that the points where plot twists were revealed was especially impactful. So I wasn't looking too hard at it, because if you think about it too hard, if you're like, okay, this doesn't make sense, the main character's thinking the same thing. So you're like, okay, like we're all aware that this doesn't make sense. So there must be something else going on here, which there was. And I loved this book for that. 5 stars. 5 stars, my third 5-star of the year. I'm actually at a point now, I think my first book of February, March and April were all 5 stars. So the last books that I'm reading at the end of a month going into the start of a new month, they are the ones to look out for. I'm telling you. This just did so many things right for me. It was very reminiscent of fantasy romance that I've loved in the past. I did compare this to Throne of Glass at the beginning. It felt quite familiar and similar in setup. If I were to compare this directly to any one book in the Throne of Glass series, I would say it's Heir of Fire. It's very slow moving. We're mainly focused on character development. The characters are working through some shit. We have a lot of training going on. They're learning about their powers, but we are also learning things about the plot a little bit, little by little, as the book goes on. And I definitely feel like structure-wise it was kind of similar to Heir of Fire in that way, really endearing us to the characters and strengthening their bond. There were so many times in this book that I knew that this scene had been crafted as a little bit of a fan service, if you will. Like, it was putting them in situations that were incredibly tense and have been great at generating sexual tension throughout like the history of romance. Putting them into situations where they're obviously going to antagonize each other, putting them into situations where they have the opportunity to say the right thing that makes the other one stop and like question their true motives. All of these scenes were like carefully orchestrated to give the reader a little bit of something. And you know what? Sometimes when that happens, it feels really obvious and out of place. But throughout this book, I was eating it up. I love Enzo. I know I've said it before, but he's my guy. I had such a good time with this one. And the plot twist just made it even more delicious. I said this before, I am a big fan of the he falls first trope. I'm not sure if I mentioned it in relation to this series. So that is my favorite trope within romance, and it's essentially when you have I love devotion. So it's when the male character, it is typically the male character, the love interest with a female protagonist, but the love interest character is so devoted to the main character, but she doesn't have a clue. Maybe she doesn't trust him. Maybe she thinks that he doesn't like her for some reason. Maybe there's been miscommunication or misunderstanding in the past, when actually it is the fact that he is just so devoted to her that has caused this reaction, or is like the true kind of feeling behind it. Now, in some books that I love, you only find that out much later on, and in some books it is present from quite early on. And I think there are different ways that this trope can be done, and one way I really enjoy it is the way that it was represented in this book, where you know that the main character distrusts the love interest, but you know you're a reader, you're reading a book, you know he's the love interest. And so when he's saying things that the main character doesn't believe, when he's showing that he doesn't necessarily hate her, when his actions aren't matching up to the way that he's supposed to feel, we see what it is. Like, we see him falling first when she doesn't, because she does have reasons to distrust him. And I eat that shit up, and it was so good in here. So if you are here and you're not new to my channel, if you've been here for a long time, if you have taken Romantasy recommendations from me in the past, this is one to pick up. I loved it. I loved the world building, and you know, this could have been so cliche. This is a magic system based on the zodiac. I'm a celestial zodiac girly, okay? Every girl like me wants to read a celestial zodiac book, and this could have easily been so gimmicky, but I feel like it very quickly developed into its own world where it was believable, and it wasn't just like, oh, this is the Taurus kingdom and this is the Aries kingdom. Like, it felt like a well-developed fantasy world, and I have to hand it it to Amani Arayu for that, because there are so many ways that this could have gone badly, but it worked really well. We also have a fantasy plotline in here, and I really like the main character in general, Alara, but I loved her arc throughout here. We had a little bit of darkness. We had a lot of her testing herself and having to get stronger and stronger, but while also embracing her vulnerabilities, which I adored. Loved the side characters. It's a winner, guys. And I was, up until I want to say those plot twists started rolling in, I was like, is this 5 stars? It has a lot of elements of a 5-star, but like, am I 5-star invested? I'm 5-star invested now, baby. So this is the shining jewel the Fairyloot Romantasy subscription so far. I was dubious about whether we were going to find a 5-star in here, mainly just because it's so rare for me at this point, but damn am I glad that we did. Oh, spice level. Actually, in terms of our cute little smutometer, I am torn between a 2 and a 3 chili pepper rating on this one. I kind of want to lean towards a 2 if I'm being honest. There are a couple of spicy-esque scenes scattered throughout here. It is very much a slow burn though. This relationship is a slow build, and it is definitely one that prioritizes strengthening and developing emotional and romantic bonds between the characters before we really talk about sexual attraction. And then when we do get to those spicy scenes, they are explicit, but the language used is more of the, I want to say like Sarah J. Maas nature. It's things like entrance and length and hardness as opposed to cock, you know? So I think right now I would put this as a 2, but I can definitely see it hovering between a 2 and a 3. Like, it's not completely wrapped in metaphor, but it's not explicit. Like, it's not super graphic. You know, it's more romantically written than erotically written. There we go. I feel like that's the perfect way to describe it. So that pretty much wraps up episode 3 of our little experiment here. And I was right. Episode 3 had the best books. So at this point, what have we learned about the romantasy genre? So I feel like in episode 2, we learned that when it comes to the smutometer, when it comes to the spiciness of a book, I like it to be around a 3 stars. That is like my sweet spot. I also don't mind a 2, as we discovered with Heavenly Bodies. I think in terms of what we just said as well, I prefer romance, fantasy romance that focuses more on the emotional and romantic connection between the characters and is a little bit more of a slow burn than it is about the sexual attraction of the characters. And in this episode, I think what I've realized is that there is romantasy for fantasy readers and there is romantasy for romance readers. And that's really the point that I was trying to get across in episode 1, where I said that some people believe that romantasy is essentially if you took the romantic plot away, there would be no book, there'd be no point in reading it. It's a romance on a fantasy backdrop, whereas fantasy romance would be like if you stripped the romance, there would still be a fantasy plot. Now, I do think that that is potentially a useful way of differentiating between whether it's a fantasy romance or a fantastical romantic story targeted at romance readers or fantasy readers. However, I don't think that that is how the genre is being used. I think, as we saw with episode 1, we had what is essentially a YA fantasy and a paranormal romance. This one, the author in the content warning, I think, herself describes this as a paranormal romance, not a romantasy. So at this point, I feel like everything is just being shoved under the umbrella term of romantasy because it's a buzzword and it can make money. Whereas I do feel like if the genres were used properly to actually differentiate between the two, then they could actually be a really helpful term to help people decide like what romantasy or fantasy romance stories are for them. Because what I have learned in terms of how I feel about the genre is that I think, and I mean, I knew this if I'd ever really thought about it in a way that would enable me to articulate it. I am a fantasy reader first and a romance reader second. Fantasy, well, actually contemporary romance was my dominant genre when I was a teenager, and then as I've come back into reading since I was 21, so the last like 10 years, it has been fantasy focused. I did read some paranormal like when I was a teenager as well, and then in the last couple of years I've introduced contemporary romance. So what I'm looking for, complex fantasy worlds, strong fantasy plot lines, and also a romance that I can root for and be emotionally invested in. I'm not looking for a like contemporary romance story on a fun fantasy backdrop in most cases, because I do really like The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy by Megan Bannon, which is essentially a rom-com in like a fun fantasy world that I really, really enjoyed. But out of the 3 that we've read for episode 3, I would say A Fire in the Sky by Sophie Jordan and Heavenly Bodies by Amani Ariyu are both books for fantasy first readers, and I would say The Coven by Harper L. Woods is for a more romance forward reader. So we've learned something else about me and my relationship to this genre, but I do think in terms of what we're learning about romantasy, it's still just reinforcing my belief that it is just a buzzword that marketing departments of publishing companies are currently using to sell more books. But down in the comments, let me know if you have read any of the books that I have read for episode 3. Did you love Heavenly Bodies? I am desperate to know. I know that some of you did, especially if you're here. I know that you did. Also, let me know if you made a prediction at the end of episode 2 about which of these I was going to enjoy and which ones I wasn't. Let me know whether you got it right. I actually enjoyed all of them. It goes in order from least favorite to favorite this way, with this one being like an actual probably new favorite. Very excited for the sequel. And if you guys want a little bit more from this series, do not worry, you do not have long to wait, because next week I am going to be bringing you guys the final installment of this series before I wrap the whole thing up, which is going to be my thoughts on the January, February and March 2025 Fairyloot Romantasy books. Now at this point I have still not unboxed the March book yet. That one is Firebird by Juliet Cross. And of these 3, I have another low-key chill 5-star prediction. So another one that I think I'm going to love, which will hopefully be a new favorite. I have one I'm cautiously optimistic about. I've heard good things about the author. And then one that I don't have too much of an opinion on. So let me know down in the comments if you guys can guess which one is which. But aside from that, guys, I do hope you're enjoying this series, and I do hope you've enjoyed this video if you've made it this far. If you have, please don't forget to like if you liked it and subscribe if you wanna, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you're go when nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.